firefighting agencies will see there's a fire burning for 2 or 3 days. And we thought, how can a fire burn for 2 to 3 days without anyone finding it out?
You went from university to revolutionizing how we detect wildfire from space, securing over 70 million euros in funding.
We are incorporating the largest amount of satellites which are capable to detect fires.
Space is humanity's greatest laboratory. Defense is democracy's strongest shield. And today, in workshops, in laboratories, in startups, a new generation rises, not to observe history, but to write it, where every innovation above drives progress below, where every breakthrough in defense preserves our freedom to create. Behind every breakthrough stands a founder with a story. Now these stories emerge to light the path for those who follow. Welcome to Rockets and Radars.
Hi, Thomas. Before we dive in, grab your drink. In your case, is it latte or cappuccino? Cappuccino, okay. In my case, it's dark coffee at two parts of the table. You went from working on a satellite technology at university to building a company that's revolutionizing how we detect wildfire from space, securing over 70 million euros in funding and launching multiple satellites with thermal imaging capabilities. I want to understand not just the company journey from the very start until the very present, but also the person behind this journey, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. So let's get into that. Before we get into the journey of the company, I would love to get into the introduction. For people that might not know you, can you explain in a few sentences of what OroraTech is and does as a company?
So first of all, hi Martin, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast. Myself, I'm Thomas. I'm one of the founders of OroraTech. I've built up OroraTech as CEO for about 5 years, raised the first rounds to Series A, and then changed my role to be the Chief Strategy Officer, and just recently launched our US entity, OroraTech USA, and there I'm also the President and CEO now overseas. And yeah, somehow launching a small company again, but of course with the big backing behind of the success we already have. It's a pleasure
awesome.
to be here. And you want to know what OroraTech is doing? We provide space-based fire intelligence to the heroes on our world. So especially firefighters, firefighting agencies, to protect forests, to protect infrastructure, protect structures like housing, homes, etc.
This is one of the best use cases, I think, up to date of the space industry that has a huge impact, right, on the terrestrial or earthbound application. And I'm one of your fans, so thank you so much for doing what you are doing. Outside of the company, I would love to actually understand who is Thomas if he's not working on OroraTech and in his personal life.
In my personal life, I think if you work a lot, you need to compensate a lot. So in my personal life, and my girlfriend is currently training for an Ironman. So in my personal life, I'm also training for an Ironman. I'm not doing it at the moment, but I'm training with her most of the time. And so I'm doing a lot of sports. I go into the mountains. I love the mountains a lot, both skiing and hiking in summer or climbing. Yeah, doing a lot of outdoor stuff.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. Now gets into the OroraTech's journey. Let's wind back in time. And I would love to understand the days, even months before OroraTech was a live company. So let's get into the very beginning. And I would love to get into your background. I'm curious, what led you to start OroraTech in the first place?
That's a good question. I always loved space, I would say.
Loved?
Yeah, since I'm a child, I was into space and watching rockets and whatever, satellites, everything. And on the other side, I just said it today in a meeting with 15, I was selling websites. So I was already like a small entrepreneur. With 14 or 15, I did my first investment. I bought a software and then I was able to sell websites with the software. So I already started early, and somehow I think these two passions needed to come together. And this was the reason why to start OroraTech. But also the other reason was that because there were ideas for other companies too in my life, for many different kinds, because I always wanted to solve something on our planet. We were part of a research group at the university where we had the chance to build a satellite as students. And this was especially cool because, we students, we were really building a satellite from scratch. It's a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters CubeSat. It was actually super cheap, and with the grant funding they had, they paid the PhD position for a few years, the launches, etc., and a bunch of students. Yeah, we've built a satellite, and we also launched it to space. So it was not just for testing; it was really launched to space.
The name of the project was called Move 2, if I'm right. Move 2, CubeSat. Yeah.
Move 2 is right. Yeah.
And that was at TUM Munich.
Exactly.
University, right?
Technical University of Munich. I was studying electrical engineering at this time. Also before I did the entrepreneurial class at the Unternehmertum called Manager More. Also before I did some other sensor experiment on a sounding rocket. This was in my bachelor's. So I was also always into sensors. We had fiber optic sensors on the sounding rocket. I went into fiber optics, worked for a startup called Phosphor-X the years after. So I was deep in this optics sector too. And then the first time during Move 2, I went to a conference and I met someone from the orbit called Stefano, and he told me, you need to sell what you developed there at Move 2. Therefore, you can sell this? And then somehow I had this click in my brain that, yes, there's something new starting. It was super early. I mean, it was super new for space that you can do it on your own, that you can do it at home. And this was also somehow the advantage because no one was doing it. We were new in Germany to do a space startup, and suddenly everyone wanted to write about us. And so because no one else was doing space before.
What made you to decide to go for it? One thing is getting an inspiration and the realization that you can do business in the industry. But the second one is deciding, okay, let's go on this all in. I'm very curious what was going on in your head back then. And by the way, regarding the year, we are talking about 2015, 16, right? Around that time.
Yeah, 16, 17, yeah. Around this time. At this conference, it made somehow this click that you can go into this business. Before it just excluded it. So I was thinking about, should I go for one of the startup ideas or join a startup, or should I go into the space industry? So or do a PhD, probably space. So I only had these options. I never had the option to do a space startup before. And then I first realized, okay, you can do this as a startup. But what was missing, okay, what exactly are you doing there? We were analyzing if we can build satellites easier because it was tough for us as students to build a satellite. And at this time, I think there were statistics out there, excluding Planet, of course, excluding Planet Labs, that 30% of their satellites fail on orbit in the first few weeks. But of course, private satellites were not included, so companies, so it was mostly universities, etc. And we thought, we can make this better. But we also looked, okay, why do we want to build satellites? It's not like we're not doing this for us. We want to solve a problem. And of course, you can do Earth observation. You can do sensing. I was always a sensor guy since my early time at Infineon. I was in sensors. Then I was at Phosphor-X for fiber optic sensors. I was always into sensors, liked it. Some other startup idea included sensors.
I think it now totally makes sense. Space passion, sensor passion, and entrepreneurship, boom, together.
Exactly.
And it worked, right?
Exactly. and then we found out, hey, there's no one doing thermal yet in space. On the one hand, so really no one was doing it at this time. And on the other hand, we were reading the news about the forest fires globally. So we thought, okay, we really have a solution here. We have something that can really help for this huge challenge. So So we decided, yeah, let's build this thermal sensor and build it to fight the forest fires globally.
For engineers that are still in the academia and want to follow your path or want to start a company from scratch, but they might not know what to work on, what would be your personal advice to them? How to look into the market and look what solutions could be interesting or what problem could be interesting to solve?
There's no generalistic advice, because if it's too big in the media, it's probably already solved by someone. But definitely, if there's a problem out there where you have some connection, also personal connection, and I always say you need to love what you're working on. And forest fires include something else for me. I love to work in this field because I was a firefighter since I'm 16. My grandpa was a firefighter, so somehow
Here we go.
as a child, I was sitting in a fire engine. Then I was firefighting. Then I did a 9-month civil service, or alternative to military service in Austria at the fire brigades. I was at least a 9-month full-time firefighter. So it was like in my genes. And if you combine stuff you really love, and you also see that there is a challenge, but you have a solution to this challenge, yeah, it makes much more fun to work, and you can also go through the struggles, and so easier.
No, okay, very good advice. Just look into the mirror, look at what you're passionate about, right? What you know, something that others don't because they don't care about the subsector that you're super passionate about, like in your time, like firefighter background. Super cool. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's start into the founding, official founding of the company, which was in the very beginning on 2017, where OroraTech started as a spin-off. So you mentioned that you were thinking about going into the different sectors, and then you ended up in the forest fires. But was that your initial vision, or has it formed over time since you incorporated?
Yeah, it definitely formed. So at the beginning, we started, okay, there are fires, so we need to build satellites to solve this challenge. And of course, we knew with thermal we have other use cases too, other applications than fire, because we can measure temperatures and can do a lot of stuff with temperatures. But we started in 2018 with fires and also weather at this time. We very, very quickly, we were in a mentoring class from House of Mentors from Frankfurt. We had mentors on supporting us. And at the beginning, we really went into building satellites for fire detection and fire monitoring. We also won through this mentoring class our first business angel to join. I went on a conference in Luxembourg, a space conference. I won this pitch competition there, and by winning this, I get to know my second investor, was a smaller business angel. So the first, the big investor, Martin Weiss from Frankfurt, was investing, and then Clemens Kaiser joined. And Clemens was super interesting because he told us, yeah, he tried to sell fire satellites, I think 15 years ago, to the Australians, together with Kaiser Träder and the German Aerospace Agency. So there were already tries going on years ago with other technology. And he thought, hey, that's a good idea. Let's try with new technology, a new attempt. And we realized of course, every investor tells you to find customers. Clear, fully understand. But then when talking with all of them, nobody understood when we were talking about satellites and firmware. It was really, no one understood satellites, and most of them didn't understand satellites, and also especially didn't understand firmware, because firmware at this time, and still is a bit, wasn't known publicly. So everyone knows nice pictures, like RGB pictures you have from your phone, but firmware picture is something where you need other expertise to look at it, other expertise to understand what's going on. And therefore the firefighting agencies had no idea what we are providing, and they're also not interested in giving us a contract for something they have no expert to use it. And then we had calls with firefighting agencies and told us, yeah, there's a fire burning for 2 or 3 days. And we thought, how can a fire burn for 2 to 3 days without anyone finding it out? Because as an engineer, you know that there are 1,000 satellites out there. So some satellites need to catch it. As an engineer, you don't accept this challenge. So we needed to have this mind shift change in our brain and say, hey, everything what's out there, no, we can't assume that everything what is there is already used, because there's this connection, this lack of connection. And so we started and reshifted actually our priorities. We started with a software for firefighting agencies to detect and monitor fires with existing satellites. After this, and we really tailored, we were speaking with the end users. This is one of the biggest differences we also made to the big institutional systems, that we were speaking with the end users. Okay, what do you actually need? It needs to say fire, it needs to alarm you, etc., etc. And this actually led today that we are incorporating the largest amount of satellites which are capable to detect fires, so mostly a thermal, in our software. And we're also harmonizing this, so the end user doesn't understand that this is Sentinel, this is a NOAA, FIRMS, whatever. The customer sees one unified active fire product, and with this unified product, they see where's the fire. And it fuses, I think today, 25 or 27 different satellite data sources, which are not ours, plus ours.
Okay, super interesting. Yeah, the takeaway here, it would be really just tell your customers what they need to know, right? They don't have to know about the background. So I love about the pivot that you just did. But we'll get into the more details in a bit. I want to wind back a bit into the very beginning, between 2017 and 18, between of you being a spin-off out of TUM until the official incorporation. You mentioned mentors as being key players in forming the company, forming the idea and the whole incorporation. So I'm very curious if you have any thoughts on, again, new founders that are thinking about maybe even spinning off of their university to get into starting a company. Would you have any tips that you learned throughout that year going from spin-off to the company, of what you should look for and what resources you should look for within the university environment?
Many founders also approach me and they tell me, this is secret, this is secret, this is secret. But if you can't talk with someone about it, you'll never find out if it's good. And you need to talk actually with as many people as possible, especially if you don't have experience, if you're a first-time founder, if you don't have a huge network with people who can give you feedback, but then you need to talk about it. You need to talk it every day. You need to tell everyone at every conference, at every evening event. You are selling your vision to just everyone. Accidentally, sometimes people are appearing who help you further. With these people, you need to continue the conversation. And this is what I tell everyone. Yeah, be open and talk, because what I also realize is every idea was already invented somewhere. I mean, you find it very deep in the internet. Somewhere you find it. You find similar ideas like ours somewhere deep into the internet. But the company we found there went silent and probably is bankrupt.
Yeah, it's about the distribution of the technology, right? And execution in the end of the day, right? Like 5 people can have the same ideas in one room, but only one might actually make it, just because he talked with or she talked with the customers, right? Understood the problems more in depth and created solutions that people are willing to pay for. So that's a great insight. Thank you so much for sharing that.
If you find someone who is really doing the same, then you should team up. Because
especially in the early stages.
Find someone.
Regarding finding of someone, before we get into the product and also the first investment, I would love to understand, how did you form your founding team with Björn, Rupert, and Florian? What made you to build this together, and how did you find each other, actually?
I did a really structured approach. So Florian and Rupert, I met both at the Move 2 project at the university. So we were working together already for a few years. With Rupert, I actually studied, so I already knew him since 5 years at this time, since the beginning, and Florian since 2 years for the full project. So we knew we are able to work together. And Björn I actually met when we were invited to present our university project and the Hyperloop and the rocket project from the student group at the conference in Berlin. And we went there, and Björn was visiting our booth, and someone was telling me that he's at our booth. And I already told everyone I want to make this startup idea, and I had a very, very bad pitch deck. So I was showing it to Björn, and he told me, wow, but I can help you to make this better, and so on. So I just extended my stay in Berlin, and we met and looked into the details, and yeah, we worked together. And after half a year or so working together, we founded a company together.
Again, talk. Don't shy about sharing the details, and boom, you got one of the co-founders here. So that's a very good takeaway here. Yeah, awesome. Before we get into the angel round that you mentioned previously, I want to get into the very first funding that you have got ever in the history of the company, and it was actually not an equity round; it was a grant from Exist. How did you secure this? The first funding is the most crucial one, so I would love to get into the process that led you to get it.
So the Exist funding is something I can recommend to anyone. You only get it if you studied in Germany on a German university, but it is a specific program where you get money, a 12-month stipendium, plus an office at the university, plus some money to spend on hardware, conferences, etc. You get it if you want to, if you have a startup idea and you have some research behind it. So as we had our research project behind us, it was the idea program to move on from a research to a startup. So it's like in between. You need to apply for it before you founded your company.
Important.
While you're in, you can then start the company, the real incorporation.
A no-brainer. Okay, so if there are any German engineers or people that would love to get into the industry, now you know. Awesome. And is there anything that you would love to know if you go back and talk to your younger self while getting into this exit grant?
Many people ask me, and to be honest, the exit grant is something you only get once in your life, yes. But on the other hand, it's zero risk. What should you do? It's after university. You probably didn't have your first job, yes. But on the other hand, it's zero risk. You stay in your student dorm, so you basically have more money than as a student if you stay in your student dorm for this year. And otherwise not, but if you keep your expenses low at student level and you get a grant, you stay there and you have 12 months plus budget to work on your idea. It's a luxury. And after 12 months, if it doesn't work out, you still have a great network to find a new job. Or it worked out, you didn't lose a lot. You didn't lose anything. You learned a lot. It's I think the same level of what you learned during an MBA, but you got money for it.
By the way, around that time, you also landed SABIC program, which was additional 50,000 euros. What do you think? Was SABIC back then a really valuable asset or resource, or was it a waste of time?
Especially for space startups, I recommend everyone to go into it because it helps you to make the first connections to ESA.
So valuable.
Yeah, and since then, ESA is a huge contributor to us, and even today, the large contracts we have, like the Greek contracts, are handled by ESA. So you need to build up this relationship and go in there as early. And to any founder, I'm just also saying, the first money you get should be free money. So you should go, it should be free. It should be grants and competitions. The first 50 to 100K for sure, before you talk with any investor.
If you went back, would you get even more grants at that early stage?
No, I think at some time it's enough.
Yeah, okay, so you don't end up in 3 years of
We
applications.
received further grants, but then larger grants. But the thing is, you shouldn't be someone of my first business angels once told me, don't be a grant entrepreneur. So,
Grant-entrepreneur, okay, fair enough. And also grants create this incentive is that, okay, cool, now we need to prepare for the next grant. It's like at school, right? I need to prepare for the next exam, but I think sometimes you forget about why you started in the first place, right? To make a business. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into your first equity round where you get some impressive angel investors. One of them, you mentioned that previously. I would love to understand, how did you approach this round? Were you systematic around outreach? Did you have any strategy back then, or was it more of a spontaneous game? As you mentioned, you went to an event and then you met one of the investors. So I'm very curious, what was your approach there?
we started with Martin Martin Weiss from Frankfurt as one of the huge investors early stage in a company. Clemens, who wanted to sell wildfire satellites 15 years ago, but with different technology and larger ones. And then a year later, Ingo Baumann joined. Ingo is one of the partners, BHO Legal, one of the leading space law firms, and Rainer Horn joined, and he was partner at SpaceX Partners, which is now Nova Space. You probably heard about it. And I think this group of these four people were one of the leading mentors in the beginning, and I met all of them via network. We tried a strategic approach with sending out emails, crunching what the investors are interesting, but at the end, it's always network.
Again, proactive talking.
Yeah, proactive talking, go on events, talk with people.
Cool.
What's interesting, when I was young, when at the beginning, we also had no money to go on events, but because space was so new, people tried to invite me. So I always ask if they pay for it, and they paid for everything. So basically, I had free trips to Luxembourg and other places, and which didn't cost the company a lot. But at the same time, I built up the network, and this is how I get to know to all the people.
I love scrape approach. Ask other people for help, and I believe like most of the people would help, especially if you are in the early stage, right? Like, anyway, let's get into the product itself, right? One of your first major commercial contracts was Arauco, Chile. I'm very curious, how did you land this international client, and how is connected to your product iteration approach? You mentioned that in the beginning you were trying to figure it out how you sell it. Then you started to talk with the firefighter organizations, and then you figured it out that that's the way how to pitch the product. How are those two things connected to each other?
The first contract was Arauco, Chile, and Forestry Corporation New South Wales in Australia. And interestingly, and I just reflected on this a week ago, in 2019, COVID hit. Was it 19 or 20? I don't know exactly, but when we did this sale, COVID hit, and it was 20. COVID hit, and we needed to sell, and we found out that we need to, why not take advantage of this, that everyone is happy of taking video calls. So we were really trying to sell worldwide, and this was what brought our first success, because in Germany we have 2 customers in Germany, and it's not a lot, and the ROI for these customers is still high, but the ROI for someone in Chile who has their own firefighting agency, a private one, who is losing money every season, who needs to protect their shareholders' interest, actually, this is something completely different. So that's how we came into contact with this commercial forestry industry.
Okay, great. Do you remember the exact moment that led you to secure this first commercial contract? Do you remember your very first talks? How did you pitch your company to them? Do you remember any highlights or insights from that part of the journey?
It wasn't me who pitched, it was Björn. Björn was focusing on all these contracts. But what I remember is that there were Bavarian representatives all over the world. It's not fully an embassy because Bavaria is not a real state, but they have representatives, and we just reached out to them, and they introduced us. Yeah, you never know, but there's support everywhere somehow. So they introduced us, and then we were talking with them online, and they liked us. One of our engineers we hired from the university program, he was still a student at this time, but he's also from there, and he was speaking with mother tongue. We built it up. And also what was interesting was in the first year, we did a trial with them for a few weeks. And during the trial, they detected a few fires with us. And then they told us, oh, we detected a few fires earlier than we did. So it pays off.
By the way, you mentioned the Bavarian stakeholders, right? Around the world. Are we talking about embassies, or are we talking about trade offices, or what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a mixture because Bavaria is no state like Germany. They can't have embassies, but
yeah, that's why I was super
it is
curious.
similar setup, like a trade office and representative office here.
Okay, representative offices. Okay, super. Interesting insight, especially if you're starting out, reaching out to the local network, even on a global scale. It's a very interesting approach. So thank you for sharing that. And then you mentioned that you had your first hires. So I'm very curious. How did you approach on hiring the first employees since the very beginning, in the very early stages?
We solved this at the beginning super easy. We had this student project running, and so the first employees were all coming from this, and then a few employees were coming like over the network from us founders, friends, other known people.
Did you ask them that we are hiring? Do you know anybody, or were you more specific?
We had a lot of inbound because we had a cool project. What we did was strong at the university because I knew it from other companies. We always had good ties to the institutes at the university. So we were giving out at the time we had no money. We were giving out master's theses and bachelor theses, etc. for credits. The students could work with us. They write their thesis. They get some credits at the university, get some industry experience. So it was a win-win. And without money, I think it's one of the best things you can do at the beginning to get something done. But also, and we did this probably too long because then you have a very, very junior team. But with the investors, and so we started and building up our team, building up also a few senior people, a good mixture of senior and juniors.
Let's get into the business model. You mentioned about how you iterated through the product in different phases, how your business model evolved over time since you started the company until now, and how did it evolve as you got customer feedback?
We started as a subscription-based company from the beginning on, like a software as a service company, but with space assets behind. And this is still the case. So most customers are paying a subscription fee, and this also parts of the product can only be subscribed via this subscription fee. But what's also the case is that, and this is something last year started to happen, or 2 years ago started to happen, that customers are also willing to pre-finance constellations, so satellite constellations. And of course, they want to own it because that's a big shift, or not a big shift, but again, shifting a bit back from all the space companies moved into SaaS. Now governments again realize they want to own some assets, or they have budgets in a way allocated that they can only use it for stuff they own and not for subscriptions. But this was super interesting and helpful for us because if they want to pre-finance the constellation, we don't need to get venture capital money for this. And this is very interesting what we landed with the contract in Greece and in Canada, that they are buying the satellites from us. So we're launching the satellite, we're building it, we're bringing it to space. They're buying it from us. Well, we are still operating the satellites, and we're allowed to use the data for other clients and sell it outside of the customer's area.
Did those two customers that you just mentioned came up with the idea, okay, we can pre-finance that because you were working on the subscription model, or have you thought about it internally? Let's try that approach.
Different. So in Canada, it actually started in Canada. Canada, I think already for 10 or 15 years is developing the concept of a wildfire satellite, because Canada is the perfect place for wildfire satellites. They have huge areas with no people in it, no one hiking, calling the fire brigade. They need to do daily observation flights. They fly like grid patterns over the area on a daily basis in the afternoon to capture fires. And most fires are also burning in the afternoon. So in all the research you see from the Canadian wildfire sat is that in the afternoon, they need to launch a satellite constellation to capture fires in the late afternoon. We heard about this already some years ago. And when they published the first phase of this large contract, we, of course, directly applied for it. And we were competing with two other companies in this first phase, submitting our proposal. And then we were super lucky that we wrote a good proposal. So we are super happy that we won this contract then in the second phase. And because this is already like a long-term thing, also with legacy space companies in it who competed for it, this owning assets was always something they wanted.
Now let's talk about the funding. Series A, which was the next milestone of your company in 2021, where you raised 5.8 million euros, led by Findus Venture and Ananda Impact Ventures. I'm curious, what was your pitch to investors back then, and what made you successfully raise the round? You mentioned previously that your pitch wasn't that very good when you met Björn in the very beginning. So I'm very curious how your pitch has evolved over time, and what were the main things that made the investors take and sign the papers to give it the money.
So in this round, we won Ananda Impact Ventures, Findus Venture, Apex Venture, and Bayern Capital. These are the main new investors in this round. In Bayern Capital and Apex is a venture firm being already new since 2 years or so. So they were always, they are Vienna based, but always when they came to Munich, they visited us and we had continuous conversation how we're developing. They are a deep tech fund. So they really like our technology. Bayern Capital, I would also say they really like our technology, also that we are Bavarian, building it up here. The possibilities of the technology. Findus is the family office. I would say a combination of liking the technology, but also already active in the space sector and seeing the potential if you go into this business. And Ananda Impact Ventures is a very specific case because Felix, the analyst there, did analysis about forest fire without talking with us before. We found out that forest fires will grow over the years and will create more costs, etc. So we thought about, hey, why not? What are the cool companies in the forest fire sector globally? And then he came to us, and we were one of the cool companies in Munich. And so they basically, had the hypothesis that forest fires will get stronger and create more damage, and therefore there will be more investment into protecting against forest fires. This will benefit us. So that's how this round was set up and how everything was coming together.
And if you compare it with the angel round, what were the major differences in pitching and also in the process, if you can share?
I would say in the angel round, it's still a lot of, you're a smaller team and angels know that you need to do a pivot. And during this phase, you're also changing a lot. So although it doesn't change a lot from the outside, in the inside, I would say it feels like 360 degrees continuous.
Yeah, the early stages are like that. And in Series A round, what was the main focus there?
Yeah, so in the angel round, they're investing in the people, but in the Series A round, they are looking at the people, but also already at the market traction. So you really need to have some customers and some market proof. Yeah, you don't have, at this time, we said we have product market fit, but I would say we have better product market fit today than at this time. But they're also already looking if the market is buying it.
If you now, as you are here, went back before you closed that round, is there anything that you would say to your younger self, like, think about this, like, this is how it is? Is there anything you would whisper to your ear?
I have one principle. If you look back, you always need to think about what information did you have at this time and how is the outside at this time. And at this time, we were the first company attracting or convincing an impact investor to invest into space. We didn't get any space investors. We had tons of other investors suddenly looking into the space sector. And yeah, I could tell my younger self, go to the US far earlier. But on the other hand, because in the US it was normal to invest into space. And everyone knew how this is working. But on the other hand, we started to convince investors who were not in the space sector to invest into the space sector. And even today, we have investors who are not in the space sector. The newest two investors, two banks, they are not a classic space investor. They are more generalistic investor. But they realized that, yeah, space is just some of the technological things in your company, like a new nice shiny AI, another toolbox, whatever. But the full pipeline down to the customer, this is the real playing field.
Yeah, interesting. So you have a very, let's call it a very big spectrum of different types of investors on your cap table. And if we talk about the next round, Series B, right? Like, how are you prioritizing who to talk to, right? Because when you have a very broad spectrum of investors, you can talk with different firms forever. Like, it takes a long time. You have a big pipeline in comparison with the space investors, which is much smaller. So I'm very curious, how are you prioritizing who to talk to in Series A, but also in Series B later on?
What happened during this time? We had several crises during the foundation of the company, like first COVID, then economic crisis, then war. It's tough for the company, and every plan you make at this time, it turns out to be different. It turns out to be wrong. And what we did, for sure, for Series B, we talked to double the amount of investors than for Series A, because suddenly every investor was holding back money. And also heard like other friends were having hard times raising money. People where the insights, it took twice the amount. Many companies were actually going bankrupt in the last half year or year. We had fire sales happening in the last year because companies couldn't find new investors. So I would say we were talking with a ton of investors. There were many conferences, presenting, spreading out, doing going on investor conferences, presenting a company, going on podcasts, accepting the invitations.
This comes to the very beginning when you said that just talk with everybody and see what ticks. So I think it's very relatable also in the fundraising phase.
It's very relatable. One thing to add, of course, at some time you need to narrow down the funnel, and it's like you say, funnel, and you need to decide with who you're talking and continuing.
I would love to get more into the Series B round, but before we get there, I would love to get into your very first satellite launch in 2022 on SpaceX. On a personal level, what was the moment like? And for the company, what it meant on the business side?
The moment was great. I mean, you always have it on your business plan that you're launching satellites, but if you're really doing it, it's something different. It's a different feeling. And it was during COVID. We were just, I think, 5 or 10 people in the office sitting there with tests before and couldn't make the party as planned. We had a live stream from the office also to the world outside. And yeah, it was just a great feeling because this doesn't happen very often. It was a big lift for the full team to get this done because the rocket is not waiting for you. You need to deliver on time there.
Definitely. Okay, great. One more thing before we get into the series, be more in depth. In 2023, late 2023, you transitioned to a chief strategy officer as Martin Langer became the CEO. What made you to do this decision?
The thing is, we were always building up the team. So after the Series A round, the first thing I realized is I need a CFO urgently, because the VC investors are asking things where we are just spending tons of time. So I was looking into experienced CFO and found Victor. And then, of course, we found out we need a CCO who is able to work on large contracts, so like 20 million plus, because there's a chance on the horizon that we're winning this. So we were also looking to find someone and found Axel. And then the next thing is that I'm very good at starting things. So I realized, okay, now it's a big corporation somehow. It needs a little bit of different leadership. I was doing it for, always say 5 years, but actually the pre-funding time, it's nearly 7 years. So it's even more. And I realized I want to do some other stuff again. I was always annoyed that we were unsuccessful in the US. But I also realized that, yeah, you only need to follow the steps and you're then successful. So I thought, I want to understand this now and have time to go deep into it. And Martin was ready to take over. Martin was already leading our university research project. So he was also the right person for this space. So Martin took over. He's a good friend since a lot of time, since many years. And then I transitioned into the chief strategy officer. And then I worked onto the next big project. And this is what we did now, founding of our US entity.
So let's get into that. Founding your US entity. Tell us the whole story from the very beginning. You said that you were struggling a bit in establishing the office. Tell us the whole story there.
No, so before the US office, we also wanted to get US customers, but we were struggling a lot. And I want to understand why we're struggling. And US, it's a different culture. So it's hard to sell to the US if you're not on ground there. And any online guideline you read from other investors, from McKinsey, whoever publishes something, they say you're only successful in the US if you have a company there. So even if I try to argue why we weren't, all the statistics say that you're not successful if you don't have a local entity there and local people there. So I've did the research, made up the plan. Already at this time last year, we then won first clients, even from Germany. We did this with our partner Spire together. We wrote answered an RFI, so request for information, for NASA JPL to build a wildfire constellation for the US. It's one of the interesting clients last year. But then last year in October, we founded then our US entity finally. We decided to go to Colorado, Denver, and this was also a long process to select the right state, the right city.
Why did you choose Colorado?
Some would say skiing, but the reality is Colorado has a huge forest fire problem. So they have a lot of lightning strikes additionally, and they have a lot of forest fires, and they are not that technically equipped like California. So they need satellites much faster than anyone else. Then all the space sector is currently moving to Colorado or the Denver metropolitan area. Many space companies are there, so you have huge access to talent and a lot of knowledge, friends. CU Boulder, so the university, we just visited them a few weeks ago. They are one of the the largest NASA funding receiver from agencies which are not called NASA something. So there's a lot of space going on, and there's a lot of forest fire going on. So, and then of course we found the Treffpunkt. They made a place there from the German-American Chamber of Commerce, the German Honorary Consul. They founded a place like a building with 3 floors where you can also incorporate your company. We have a lot of support there locally from the development office, from Denver, etc., to just get us started.
How was the initial approach of acquiring US customers? Because you mentioned US market has a different mindset, and you had to figure out how to get there. So do you remember who you landed first from the US market?
So the first signed customer, there were 2 signed customer on the US company, and these 2 were Skyfi. And it's very interesting. We're still finding out how we can actually scale with Skyfi, because they have access to a new set of clients we're currently not thinking of, we're currently not approaching. So this is a huge market potential for us. And the other client is really in the forest fire sector is Larimer County, is one of the largest counties in the US. And they told stories. So they came to our opening event and we had a panel talk with them. They were asking, they were actually telling how they envision to use our system, because they just started that 2 weeks before the opening. But they told me they have a lot of false calls in the summer. So 911 calls which turn out to be not fires, but they need to react on everyone. So they're constantly driving around and looking for fires. They call that there's a fire behind the hill. They need to go there. Sometimes they need to hike half an hour to see the fire. And if there's no fire, of course it's good because it was no fire, but they also lost time and didn't have the personnel to catch another fire, which probably was a fire. They were even telling stories like once the moon was rising and it was looking very orange on the horizon. And everyone in Colorado can tell you stories about forest fires and how they burn down some of their chalet or of the smoke or something else. So they're really scared. They're calling the fire brigade for everything now, which is good. But on the other hand, with all the false alarms also causes prioritization problems for the fire.
Yeah, huge demand for,
So they really envision to use our system as prioritization solution to find out, okay, if there's a fire alarmed, should I really go there? What does the satellite say? Where's the fire? If there's a fire, would it break out and spread very quickly? How would it spread with our simulation? Or would it just spread towards the lake and stop anyways? So they can prioritize their efforts, especially in summer when they have limited resources. It's critical.
And I will keep on this topic of customers around the world. So you have acquired customers around the globe, right? So since the very beginning, actually, as you mentioned, during COVID. I'm very curious, are there any big differences between customers, let's say in the US, Europe, and Oceania? Are there any things that you should know about if you want to tap into those markets, apart from having the subsidiary in the US market at least?
Big difference in the US market, you need a subsidiary and you charge in US dollars. In Australia, you can charge euros and no one cares. The rest of the world is much more open, but also if you want to get into larger ticket sizes, you need to work with local resellers or whatever. But initial contracts, you can always land everywhere on the globe.
Okay, great insight. Okay, one last thing before we get into the quickfire and the questions. So, as I mentioned, I really wanted to dig more deep in the Series B round. In October 2024, you raised 25 million in Series B, and then recently, in May 25, you raised an extension of 12 million, which brought up the total financing round of 37 million euros in total, which is quite great. So, as you raised a lot of money in that round, I would love to tap into the biggest differences between the Series A and the Series B round. If you have any thoughts to share with the founder community there, what others should look for when they are raising Series B?
If you are raising Series B, it's definitely different to Series A. Series A is still a transition from business angel to structured financing. This mixture of trust and trust that something turns out very good. In Series B, they check all the numbers. So the due diligence is is not only based, or is not based on a few customer interviews, but they really dig into the numbers, into the market, in the broader research, etc. So they really want to see if you have product market fit and if you can scale this to the next phase.
Is there any fuck up that happened in either Series B or any other funding rounds that you were like, oh, okay, let's fix that? Do you remember any low points there?
What I can tell to every founder is it always takes longer than you expect. Even if you have the verbal commitment or a signed commitment from every investor, until you're at a notary and signing the contract, it takes longer, always.
Okay, great insight. Great insight. Applicable to anybody in the industry. Okay, great. Last thing, let's talk about the future. Where is Thomas and OroraTech going in short and long term from now on?
This year, we still have about 10 satellites to launch. I hope that everything happens this year and no launch slips from December to February or so. But if it works out, we have 10 satellites will be launched this year. In a short term, in a few years, we soon need to be heading towards our 100 satellites goal. And probably 100 is not 100 is more like a ballpark number, but the target is to detect fires in the regions which need it most within 30 minutes. And for this, you need about 100 satellites. So we want to scale to this. And on the other hand, is with the Series B of 37, with the Canadian wildfire sat together with Spire, where we get about 30 million, and the Greek Hellenic wildfire satellite with about 20 million. Altogether, it's about 100 million of money, let's say. Now the next phase is convert this 100 million of one-time money to a yearly subscription phase. This is what our target is. And what I see, like from the outside perspective, it's easily doable now. We have set up the processes in the company. We have built up a middle management team, which is now executing on their own, building new processes to scale innovation, to scale our customer base, etc. So we're really on a good track there, and my confidence has grown because I see like this is a big ship which is improving itself constantly.
Yeah, and also the problem is getting bigger and bigger on a global scale, right? So it's great that you exist, and again, I'm a big fan of how your technology has impacted the globe, even after just a few years of you being founded. So thanks so much for being in the game. Okay, one last thing before we end up the episode is quick fire round question. So, what is the most challenging technical problem you have solved at OroraTech?
I'm always challenged that our email signature looks the same on every outpost, on every tool. I would say our first one was when we launched it, it was looking into the sun, and we didn't close the shutter because we were too scared that we can't open the shutter again. It's also a risk. But then it was looking into the sun and the pixels were burning. And at the first we thought the sensor, everything is lost. But actually the team understood what's going on. The team had a very good contact with the sensor producer. We learned about secret commands to the sensor, and we were able to recover a sensor which seemed to be broken because of looking to the sun for too much time. We were able to completely recover it because we had such a great team in doing this. So this is one of the moments where I really say, okay, this was one of the, if this breaks now, we don't have a satellite and we burned the money, but they recovered it in a way just via software remote, but the team dig into all the details.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Okay, next one. What is the one thing about being a space founder that nobody talks about but should?
Being a founder is just being a founder, and the space makes not a big difference, although it makes a lot of fun and it's super cool. The thing is that it's like founding any other company, and space doesn't make you different when you talk with investors, because at the end, or with anyone else, because you're not selling to space. At at least in our case. And your investors are not actually can also invest in non-space companies. So you're competing against non-space. So you shouldn't talk about space too much.
Yeah, don't put space on a pedestal at all times. That's a great one. Thank you so much for answering here. Do you have any last thoughts for our audience?
I'm always saying this, but you always need a little bit of luck, of course, when you found a new company. But also the definition of luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So you can really prepare for it.
Good one. And actually, I have a bonus question on my mind. How has the European ecosystem, either in space or deep tech, evolved since you started? And what do you think it still needs to improve for founders and companies in the industry?
It evolved a lot because it's more and more looking on to the big challenges. It understands deep tech more than before. Like we see quantum investments here, we see AI investments going on. We had vertical takeoff, landing airplanes, and we are not doing pizza delivery services, etc. anymore. So we moved a lot, but what's really still missing is that there's not enough funding in Europe. And I think investors need to understand also that if you're coming from the US, and in the US, you still have a lot of funding. So, and investors in the US also realize it, or all over the world realize it, that there's not enough investment in Europe. So there's more and more investment coming from the outside to Europe. But because it's far away, different legislations, etc., it's tough. So there's a big opportunity to do bold investments in Europe.
And regarding funding, do you think that it's lacking in the more earlier stages or more in the growth stages, so Series A plus, Series B, and so on?
Definitely Series A plus, more in the growth stages. Early stage is super easy, but Series A plus, that's the big question.
Okay, great. So if there are any investors listening, talk to Thomas asking for advice how to get into the industry. And for others, in the description of the episode, you can find links to get in touch with OroraTech, either as a potential hire if you want to get hired, or if you want to potentially invest in the future round. So I will leave all the links below so they can get in touch with you. And thank you so much for joining the episode. It was so much fun. And yeah, and a lot of advice that it's still going in my head. So thanks so much for sharing your journey and thoughts here.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you so much.